Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Got Mental Health Podcast. I am your co-host, Rachel Cove. I am a multi-passionate entrepreneur, author, artist, mother, and certified recovery coach.
I'm your co-host, Arthur Mogilevsky, entrepreneur, girl dad, animal activist, and owner of AM Healthcare, a premier substance abuse and mental health treatment program.
With the collective experience of 21 years working in the mental health field, we are excited to bring to you a safe and fun place to talk all things mental health.
We will be interviewing experts, thought leaders, entrepreneurs, and professionals in the entertainment industry to better educate, inform, and inspire our community to have positive mental wealth.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Got Mental Health Podcast. I am your co-host, Rachel Cove, along with my other co-host who's back in the studio, Arthur Mogilevsky.
Mogilevsky, Rachel.
I'm never going to get it right.
Let's get it right.
No. We have Charles Tseng back in the office here because I was so motivated but also intrigued by our last conversation about AI, and I feel like there's so many layers to it, and Arthur wasn't here for it.
Thanks for reminding me.
Okay.
Very disappointed that I wasn't. That's why
I had to bring Charles back because Arthur's going to ask specific questions that my brain won't think about, and that's why he's my co-host. So I have Charles Tseng back in the studio, managing partner of Genera Fund, where he's channeling his experience from building over a dozen startups into investing in early stage AI tech. Charles and his team are set to shape the future with Genera funding the building of 18 groundbreaking AI and Web3-based startups. Join us as Charles shares not only his journey in mentoring future entrepreneurs, but also his insights into how AI will redefine our lives in the future of work. The thing that interests me about you, Charles, is you also study neuroscience and psychology. And I feel like that's how we got started on this whole conversation months and months ago at the park, was you're able to discuss AI, but also from the mental health, psychological, neuroscience studied point of view.
Yeah.
So I'm going to let Arthur take over now.
Well then, no, I think it is fascinating. I mean, before the podcast started shooting, you mentioned that. Well, let me ask you this. Why is it that neuroscience and human psychology has interested you in trying to bridge that between technology?
Well, what's interesting is AI, or artificial intelligence, is us engineers and programmers trying to mimic what the human brain does.
Right.
So it's a symbiotic thing where you kind of have to understand one in order to understand the other and build the other. And as we understand more and more about AI, we're actually understanding more and more about how the human brain works.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the stuff that I do, which is around early stage startups, is marketing as well. And so most of what we talk about is around psychology, how to get people to adopt technology, how to get people to accept data, and how to manage workflow. How, a lot of technology, the problem isn't actually getting it to work. It's getting people to accept it into their day-to-day work lives or personal lives.
Mm.
So you look at the iPhone and how complicated it is, but it really did not become a thing if it weren't for the design of the iPhone and how easy and intuitive it is, and how, I hate to say the word, addictive the phone is. That really allows you to launch other applications of the app.
Would you say that, in comparison, let's say with a Droid phone, you have your Droiders for life, you have your iPhoners. Would you say that the design of the iPhone from a psychological standpoint was created in order to bring a much easier experience to the user, and that's why more and more people adopted it instead of a Droid?
Yeah, I think it's we talk a lot about like brand. It's one of those human psychology thing where people are just loyal to a brand. So Android, the operating system came from Google, goes after the more type of people who are into rebelling against the status quo, right? More about features and technology.
Hacking.
Yeah, and then Apple users are more of a status and about convenience. We actually talk about this in marketing, is in neuroscience, we learned that the brain really has two systems, right? System one, system two. One is a cognitive and the other is a feeling. And people generally, throughout their lives, are more weighted one or the other. And so when you're creating a brand for a new company, you're really trying to either tackle into one mindset or the other. So an example is Apple's a great thing. You have an emotional feel when you see the brand. And so people don't buy things just off of, oh, how fast is the CPU or whatever. Right? And Apple phone is always going to be underperforming compared to its equivalent Android because of it's a closed ecosystem. It's only one company building it. But what they have an amazing approach is to tack into your emotional connection to their company.
Mm. Yeah, I mean they're loyal, they're trustworthy. I mean, people get the Mac computer because limited with viruses and malware. They're just again a trustworthy. They exude the trustworthy kind of brand in a sense, and a safe brand, and also like you said, the upper echelon, high end, status quo. That's fascinating. So the question that comes to beg, like you understand human psychology. These companies understand human psychology. How much of it, from an industry standpoint, from your side, is used towards good or evil, right? Because like you can take this in a lot of different directions.
Well, we try and stay neutral.
Sure.
Tongue in cheek. Ultimately, what we're trying to drive is we're trying to sell a product.
Sure.
We are consumerism. And so we are hoping to also try and solve big human problems. So when Facebook came out, they wanted to connect people. And its side effect there's a lot of side effects as well to it, the technology. But the original intent has always been good. And as engineers are maturing, we're talking a lot about ethics and AI.
Mm-hmm.
And to be honest, none of us really know. It's like Oppenheimer, right? Like when Einstein came out with E equals MC squared, like that technology could have been used for an infinite form of clean energy, or it could have been used to wipe out mankind. Unfortunately, we've leaned towards wiping out mankind. But I mean, I wish we had used it more for what it was really good for, which is more nuclear power plants to create clean energy. But once again, it's a human emotion and psychology around technology that really changes where technology goes. Technology is just neutral. AI doesn't care. It doesn't do anything. It has no emotions. Yeah, it's how you use it.
So would you say that there's a balance in life where, like, let's say in layman's terms, someone's listening to this podcast or seeing what's going on with AI and the adaptation and is either playing with it or hearing it on the news. Do you find that there is balance in the engineering world where you're going to have the good players, the bad players, and there's always going to be that kind of medium, the happy medium that brings the world together?
Yeah, I call it the good hackers versus bad hackers, right? It really, your decisions are based on your life and how you grow up. And so most of the decisions made in technology are based off of most of us engineers, and we're in a room with the business people and the investor and stuff. We try and say, okay, we're going to build this technology. And now you see now with pitches, like how does this help forward humanity in a good way? I do see a lot of positive changes around that. Nice. But once again, every technology advancement could be used just for bad as good.
Right.
So I always I have a bit of a patriotic feel to it in that I'm very happy that all of the technological innovation is happening here in the US. Because imagine if ChatGPT was made in Russia or China invented it. That really literally dictates what that technology would have been used for if it had been invented in a country that was less free. So
it's interesting. So now you ask the question, because it is an open source technology, what's stopping from these types of countries for taking that technology and using it for evil?
There's nothing.
Okay.
So I know this is controversial amongst the news and media, but we deal with it all the time. Is IPs from Eastern Europe, Russia, Africa, Southeast countries are constantly attempting to hack all of our systems. And so we see it all the time, these bots from Russia and China just trying to manipulate the narrative around any story or article that gets sent out there. It's happening.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but obviously, in case in point, in our election 4 years ago, they were able to hack into our social medias. Even if they don't have the source code, they still can manipulate the marketing and the messaging that's put out there in the world. But that's a conversation for another day. Yeah. I think that there's a lot of fear. So I work with a lot of unions. I work with a lot of the blue collar workers in the world. And there's a lot of fear in what this type of technology can do to either replace jobs, replace the way that they've known life to exist up until this point. Obviously, as a professional in that space, what's the message you guys are caring about for people's psychology around AI and where it's leading? Like, what's the focus on, in a sense, from a marketing and branding standpoint?
Well, it's basically in everything in our lives. So you kind of got to separate it from work and personal. So I think when you're talking about the unions, et cetera, one of the biggest fears is it replacing jobs. And watching automation for decades is what tends to happen is it goes through a couple cycles. The first one is it does displace a lot of jobs. So what ends up happening is technology will come in and it might replace quite a few employees and reduce it to maybe one person managing what normally 10 people would do. And then it does, I'll keep it real, it does create income equality, right? So one of the things that makes automation so powerful is it can now take work that's normally done here in the US and then spread it across the world to countries that have much lower currency value. So an example with like ChatGPT, it used to be a lot of writing required someone with perfect English skills. Let's say now I could take it to a country where English might not be their first language, but their income is $2 a day. And that sounds horrible, but what I just described, $2-3 American dollars a day, is life-changing in the world. So now they're able to have a middle class income family. So you got to take it with a grain of salt, right? It's going to take a job away from here, and it might improve someone else's life across the ocean, and so it displaces it. So now our concern here, being Americans, is what about the jobs that are displaced here? And so what we see is the jobs then get moved. And so now instead of that person being, let's say, a writer, would more be someone managing a group of writers and proofing the work.
So what you're saying is that it, just like any technology, it will take away, but it will also add as well, right? Because now you have professional chat GPT coaches on how to ask appropriate questions. Like this never existed before, but now you have a whole slew of professionals, quote unquote, that will teach you how to ask the right question. Right.
And one of the nice things I've seen is always when this happens is it suddenly creates more work than there was before.
Really?
Every industry, telemedicine, telehealth, everything, you'd think that there'd be fewer jobs, and then the technology hits and it creates more jobs. So they're saying that right now with ChatGPT, it's going to create trillions of dollars of new American jobs.
Like what?
Well, because now a lot of the menial work is going to be kind of automated.
Can you describe like what would be like menial work?
Let's just say you had and I'm less familiar with the media industry, but let's just say now you have the opportunity. Let's say you had a script and you need to change the characters in that script. Used to be take weeks to like rewrite the characters. Let's say you're writing new Harry Potter and you want to make Harry Potter's evil now, right? It's a lot of work to do all that. Now all that menial things of editing all of the various material, making sure that facts aren't lost amongst all the new edits, that becomes automated. Now you can replace that with more creative work, which is making it a great story.
So is it, and again, I'm so naive when it comes to this stuff, but like I've said, there's no stupid questions. So is it kind of like how when you're writing an email, do you know what Grammarly is?
Yeah.
Is it kind of like that where instead of a human being fact checking, Grammarly is coming into?
Yeah. So what's more interesting about it for everyone, why it was such a big deal, was up until now, most language processing, the AI just understood the words in context to each other. So you would, it was very dumb before when I was worked on it. Like, right, like I wrote some AI like around real estate, and you would see the word roof, and you're like, oh, that's a hint that it's a question about the roof. So I'm going to give you back information about this house's roof. Now, what the new technology allows you to do is it understands the words in context with everything. And it can also, because this technology actually evolved, ironically, was they were also automating coders, right? Like it started off with an AI called Codex, where it was helping us write code. And none of us engineers were afraid like all of a sudden AI was going to replace this programming. What it did is removed all this monotonous work of like, well, I need to write a function that does this. Okay, rather than writing all this code, it writes it for me. I proof it, and then I move on to my next task. So it made me a lot faster coder. Well, when we did that, we discovered that through this new transformative AI, that we could understand words in context with the whole thing. So the example I gave you where you could feed it the whole Harry Potter saga and you do something where Hermione dies on the first chapter. What the effects of all of that across all that body of text, it already understands it in relationship to that.
So you like, okay. The coders were never afraid of it replacing the actual code work because the coders became like the directors of
Yes.
the code. What happens when you replace the director?
Well, and that's where I think the fear of AI is unwarranted because AI is very good at doing a lot of the monotonous stuff that's very repeatable, but it's not very good at the things that we do that is creative, that is constant problem solving over and over again.
Why?
Like for engineers, like we don't want to do the monotonous stuff because it frees us time to do the interesting stuff in our work. And that's kind of what we're going to bring to the rest of the world, so to speak, is that once you free yourself of, let's say, a 40-hour work week, 30 of those hours is like editing. Now you could focus on the part is your real job, which is solving problems, which is I need an app to solve this problem. And there's never in any company, there's never a day where we're like, we don't have any problems to solve, guys. Let's go home.
But isn't it part of building confidence is the persistence and the perseverance through struggle, through not knowing, and then all of a sudden you have an idea or you have to develop or improve upon a skill, right? How are you supposed to build any type of fulfillment or satisfaction if everything's done for you?
Yeah. So same as programming, what it does is you still have to train to be a programmer. So we call it, it's about 3 to 5 years before someone gets to a proficient level. But it's the same in any endeavor in life is there's always this hurdle of learning to get to the point where someone's willing to pay you money to do it, right? And what AI takes away is those entry level jobs. That is one of the things that should be concerned about. So what that means is you have to, before you enter a career, you have to figure out a way to get that experience. Why a lot of college graduates are going to an interview is like, well, we need 3 years experience. What they're really saying is all the entry level jobs are already outsourced. So the struggle is real. I agree. But what it also means is once you get past that 3 or 5 year part, it becomes less competition. It becomes less, you have a job just because you need to do menial tasks.
It's interesting though, because there's two questions here, right? I'm very curious if there's like a statistic or a number of how many innovations came through human error.
All of them.
All of them.
I think
So that won't exist anymore.
Well, no, they always will, because what we learned about learning is that we learn by failure.
Right.
So all AI is able to do is to fail millions and millions of times at a problem. It just doesn't feel any pain.
Right. So if you take that away from the human experience, the
Mm-hmm.
process of failing, and I'm not saying that you can't by being the creative, right?
Yeah.
You can still fail as the creative, right? But like it's through the process, and I'm not a coder, so I'm just going to pretend here for a second. I do a lot of work with Excel and programming databases and stuff like that, but if I'm sitting here and I'm entering the same data, or I'm formatting the structure of the database a certain way, through that process, even if I do it 20 times, I figure out, oh wait, hold on, I can do it better by doing this way, right? And so that stimulates my mind and my creative aspect. But with AI, and I'm all for it, but it takes away from that.
Well, then the AI can be an actual very patient teacher. And you're starting to see this with kids now, where they're
explain that a little bit
learning
more?
with AI. It's so amazing watching young people. I love my interns every year. They come in because I always watch. I learn more from them than they learn from me. And that when ChatGPT came out, it's only been out, it's only been out since January? It's been less than a year.
Mm-hmm.
All these college grads already know how to integrate it into the first thing that even high school kids I see now, they're like, I'm going to write my essay for college admission in ChatGPT. And they're explaining to each other prompt examples and stuff. And there was one kid where we were working on a break-even spreadsheet for this one company, and he's like, explain to me the problem again. As he was trying to explain it in a way so that he could explain to ChatGPT so that it could spit out code. He didn't know how to code very well. It spit out the code that then generated the graph. Like my thought was like, take the problem and then create it into a spreadsheet. Like he had already abstracted to explain it into a word problem so that ChatGPT can understand it and say, now generate the code, and then generate the code. And then there was a mistake. And so rather than changing the code, he changed the prompt.
Mm-hmm.
So he's still learning and he's still making mistakes, but where he's fixing those mistakes is higher up the chain than I would have done.
That's
So,
interesting.
so would a job be like, would a human have to be around to look for mistakes that AI makes? Like, would that be a job that people will be hired for?
That's already a lot of people's
Yeah.
jobs is to basically be an insurance for what
Yeah.
decisions are made by AI.
What about AI that is the insurance to the AI?
Well, so
Wait,
that's
what?
scary, yeah.
Oh yeah, well,
What
because
do you mean?
that's how teachers are now. Was it Google's AI to counteract what students using AI to write their papers?
And I thought you said that doesn't work, Charles.
Well, what doesn't work?
Because I think I asked
By the way,
you,
the AI is never wrong. It's the person that's asking the question that's wrong.
is that true?
So what's very interesting about AI is the more we do it, the more we're learning how humans learn, and we're realizing that that is the answer. So what we're seeing right now with AI is actually not a lot of changes in the actual neural network code. It's how we're building systems to learn. And so what the big realization in the last decade is that the relationship is you have one AI or neural network that acts like a teacher or a parent, and the other one that's a learning AI, and one corrects the other. Why is that radically different? What we used to do with AI was we would just have them, like Darwinism, have them just competed against each other. The one that succeeded, we'd take that code and add it to the DNA. That ended up not working so well. What we found is it's much better when you have one that knows the answer and the other one that's trying to guess at the answer. And then the one that knows the answer, we'll call it the teacher or the parent, will prompt or nudge the student, oh, that's not right, do it this way, do it that way. You're even seeing new methodologies like the new one with diffusion. You've probably seen it. You've seen all those
Photos?
mid-journey, amazing images, right?
Who's the guy who it's an Indian gentleman, right?
Yeah.
The owner.
I forgot his name.
He had a podcast with Raul Powell. Anyways, yeah, it's insane.
I think these data scientists are getting better because they're all having kids. Like I myself, with my daughter, she's only 3 years old, I'm learning how humans learn by watching her learn.
Yeah.
And so, like with diffusion, we just came up with a very simple idea, which is you take something like a Van Gogh and then you add noise to it. You just throw a bunch of splotchy brush strokes on it, and you have the student try and recreate the Van Gogh, the AI, and then the teacher comes in and says, "Oh no, this is what it should look like." You do that millions and millions of times. All of a sudden, you have something that knows how to mimic Van Gogh's painting.
Have you heard of the diffusion?
No.
So it pretty much it can take millions of images. It has a database of virtually every image that's in the web, and you can input what kind of image you want it to spew out, and it will spew out an image using all the images in the world to give you the image that you're looking for based off of what you inputted into the system.
And you can use any style too. So if you wanted to say something like paint a picture of Yoda at a cafe shop in the style of Van Gogh, it'll produce something you're like, wow, that's really good.
That's really good. So that's the scary part, right? Because so I want to dive into what's reality, what is manipulated reality, right? And our Elon Musk is like trying to not kill AI, but create a symbiotic relation between humans and AI, where we're learning with AI, right, by giving us chips and whatever. I mean, I don't know the details, but correct me if I'm wrong. Where
Giving us chips?
Neural linking,
yeah.
where you're communicating with the AI and in a sense where the AI, we're not dumb anymore. Like we're not as simple as stay as simple as we are, but we're actually adapting to as quickly or hopefully as quickly as AI is adapting. Because you can't tell if AI produces something, the normal human being at this point can't tell if it's real or not. Right? They won't be able to differentiate it. And so like trying to go back to the question I wanted to ask. If you can cut this part, please. But like, how is it that, or the innovation that's being created to bridge that gap between human relationship and AI and understanding what's real and what's not real? And like, what are the biggest fears around that?
Well, unfortunately, what is real, right, to the human experience, it's based off of your five senses, what you see, what you hear, what you smell, what you can touch. Where with generative AI, we're starting to produce images and now movies coming up. We're starting to produce text and sound. So they could take someone's voice and simulate it so it sounds very much like they're talking. Even adds the fake ums in there to kind of throw you off.
That's scary as crap.
Yeah.
Like, how are you going to know if it's real or not?
I don't know. And so
what was the Black Mirror episode where everybody hates what was that was the first episode where
Selma Hayek. I haven't watched it. Everyone
Yeah.
keeps talking about it.
Did you watch it by any
John
chance?
knows.
Oh, the Selma Hayek one. Yeah.
Yeah, where it's the actress, but it's not really the actress, and then the individual watching the show is in the show.
Yeah. Well, and that's where it becomes just like when Einstein came out with equals MC squared, right? Like our intention was just like every other human is to progress our knowledge and our intelligence forward. We can't stop that. Even if everyone stopped AI, someone will continue it.
Yeah,
Like,
there'd be that one person.
yeah, there'd be someone. It's just one of those things that you can't stop.
Right.
And so all I can do as an individual is train up the next group of young entrepreneurs and hopefully also correct them in their moral hazards in life and make better decisions. But I have no idea who's going to be the next Zuckerberg or Bezos or Musk that's going to bring about a next change and what that change is. All I do know is at some point, AI will surpass human abilities. Maybe 100 years from now, maybe my granddaughter, my granddaughter's granddaughter. And we as a society have to figure out how to live with this. And maybe what happens is we are the creators of the next evolution of whatever life is like. So in a way, we could kind of see it as we're probably gods and we're going to create children of our creation. But it's inevitable because the human brain, as I had mentioned earlier, has not changed in 150,000 years.
Right.
I don't expect it to suddenly change, whereas computers just in 20, 30 years has like exponentially gotten smarter, and it's going to go even faster in the next 10 years. So it's up to us as a society to figure out what the heck we're going to do. We don't even have an economic theory around this because all our economic theory was done a long time ago when people didn't know what AI was and assumed that if humans compete fairly for resources that the better person would make it to the top. However, what happens if you're competing against something that doesn't need food, water, or attention and does every one of your bidding and can outcompete hundreds of humans? I don't know what that economic model will be.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, especially because, like we said earlier, there's the good and there's the evil, right? There are people that are going to use this technology for the purposes of war and conquering and destruction, which is I feel like if we lived in a world where we knew that things can be used only for the good, I don't think there'd be that much fear, right? Because it's just that nobody would be trying to create harm. But there's always going to be someone that's going to be trying to create harm as well. And so like the balance as a human is, how do I survive the harm?
Yeah.
Right. And I guess that's the scary part for most people with all of this.
But the main thing I always tell people is there's not much you can do on a macro scale. Like
of course.
governments will go to war if
with or without AI.
With or without us, we have no control. If you need to depend on the government to save you, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
But how do you save yourself, right?
Yeah.
So a couple things is obviously educate yourself about technology, because there's one thing that you do need to protect yourself is just people. Most robberies no longer are physical; they're digital. People stealing your identity. So understanding how to protect you and your family through password management and understanding how to protect your bank accounts and all of those things, not fall for scams and traps.
Do you think that incorporating blockchain technology is the next, or at least on a massive scale, would help with a lot of that?
I have a lot of opinions on blockchain because I've been in that space for a little bit. I think it's a solution looking for a problem right now. Blockchain may be an answer, but I don't know, because I know in terms of cryptocurrency, it's not a solution for first world countries. I don't have a problem buying anything. Most of the solutions I've seen work a lot better in countries where their currency has collapsed and they need an alternative form of currency to do it. But we're pretty safe here in a first world country. Our issues
For now.
our current pressing issues are literally people texting you saying, hey, someone charged your bank account, call this 800 number, you call them, you give them your information, and next thing you know, they've emptied your bank account. That's a bigger problem that's present today.
It's crazy. I'm trying to sell some furniture on Facebook Marketplace, and like the first 100 responses is some scam artist saying that, send me your Venmo. Oh, Venmo's not working. Send me your email address so I can email you the money. I'm like I'm not that dumb.
But most of them aren't even in America, in the U.S.
No,
That's
for sure.
Because one of the nice things about being a first world country, I mean, we complain about a lot of things in this country, but we got to still remember we are privileged. We are the number one power. Is a lot. I go to like Latin America to hire engineers and stuff. Like literally $5 is a lot of money there, and so for them to be able to call up someone here and get them to fall for a scam and Venmo them $50 may not make your day, but literally they have whole cartel operations, just billions of dollars, just
$50 from this guy, $50 from that
us.
person. Yeah, for sure.
And a lot of the people who are falling for it are older people, younger people, or people who don't understand technology. And they were talking about hundreds of billions of dollars right now. And even happened during COVID, where a lot of the unemployment money, where they were giving
PPP loans,
all of that was stolen.
Yeah.
We're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars stolen by professional cartels from Latin America who are right now living in San Diego. It's crazy.
So I think like something we were talking about before the show, which you were going to talk about, Arthur. So you're welcome to interrupt me. Go ahead and do it.
No.
No, go ahead.
Wait, but mental health and bridging the gap between treatment.
Yeah, well, I'm curious of how our culture is going to do mentally, emotionally, psychologically, and spiritually when we have adapted how we function with AI, when children are now attaching to their robot friends versus TED at school, or their teacher doesn't have a nervous system anymore. They have, I don't even know what you call it. Like, I'm not, what would you call that? So I guess how are we going to improve mentally, or is our mental health going to decrease? Because we had Don Grant on the show one time, and he said that we now have the first generation that doesn't know what it's like to live without an iPhone.
Yeah.
And so teenagers are more inclined to seek out their phone for connection versus seek out a central nervous system for connection, right? So is that what we're now creating in children?
That is the thing that keeps me up at night. It keeps you up at night. We both have children almost the same age.
He does too.
Absolutely. I mean, just look at the behavior of tech executives and people like me. My daughter is not going to have a cell phone. Whatever school I go to, where I'm going to make them all sign that all the parents can't get cell phones. I'm going to, they're especially once you understand the brain and it's a journey going from 0 to 3, which is critical. Then 3 to 5 is the next critical phase. And then all the way up to 12, it's like, you cannot have this device, which has been built by trillion-dollar companies now, to optimize stealing your attention, taking away and optimize dopamine reactions to it. You cannot leave that alone with your kids. I think we made that mistake earlier with the prior generation, which was letting them just have a phone unregulated.
So I agree with you wholeheartedly. If I had the choice, my daughter would not have a cell phone until she's 25. Yeah. But, and she doesn't now. She's going to be 6. But you have the counter argument where you have the rest of the world that is, and yours isn't. And so how will they survive with that generation of individuals that are, let's say, more technologically savvy or ingrained in that, where they now would they create their own bubble of human connections where they won't interact with those individuals that are completely immersed in a technological world?
So that I've had that conversation a lot. Actually, I wouldn't worry about that because I've trained a lot of engineers, and even in Latin American countries where they've never had access to technology before. There's a difference between someone who's consuming it for entertainment value and someone who's working with it. So if the concern is, like my daughter, I'll train her how computers work and how to code in it. The key is to train them so that they're not addicted to it and they're not using it as something to replace something. So let me explain that. Like, if you use social media to connect to an actual human being, then that's great. That's actually what it is really good for. Like, I work remotely. I don't actually have to go meet people to do certain work. But if you use the technology as a validation, like you're looking for that 500th like to validate your life, now you're in trouble because 400 of those likes are fake. And so it's really an education problem. And once again, if you gotta wait for the government to solve it, you're in trouble. So it's really about focusing all my time and energy on explaining to them how the technology works, why it works. It's just like explaining drugs and sex or anything else, is you can't hide them from it. But you gotta explain to them why it's bad, where it's bad, how hopefully not to get addicted to it. For instance, most people don't know that most of the people that they're interacting online are fake bots. Like, that's just basic information that hasn't even been disseminated to kids.
How can someone who doesn't have the knowledge base that you have, because I don't think schools it's part of their curriculum where they're teaching kids not to, to understand the difference between the good reasons to use technology and not. Like, what can parents do in these types of situations?
Ironically, I've been thinking about that lately since I've had my daughter.
Let's open up a business. Well,
I'm actually thinking about that. I really do feel like there's a gap.
I introduced you guys.
Yeah,
there's a gap because schools right now do not think about the people teaching the children. The people who are teaching the children are Gen Xers or older. Right?
They themselves don't even know.
They are the actual victims a lot of times. In a lot of these. So there is a huge educational gap in how to live a modern life with technology, because I think the days are gone where we can say, technology is integrated into our lives. We can no longer ignore it. You have to, you can no longer, like, imagine meeting someone right now who doesn't know how to drive or doesn't know how to Google something. Like, I would ask questions and doesn't even think to Google it. Like they'd be dinosaurs. So today you have to have your whole populace understand all the basics of technology.
I mean, the scary part is that, to a certain degree, technology has been in the workforce and the outside community. Now technology is so immersed in your home life. Smart homes, smart refrigerators, smart ovens, everything has a computer, everything has an ability to connect to the outside world. And so, like, the next generations, as we were mentioning earlier, they have nowhere to escape technology. It's going to be virtually everywhere, right? So I think that there's a huge opportunity in a sense of education and understanding. And basically, like, you don't need to teach everybody how to code, but understanding what that code can do to you.
Yep.
Now, isn't that counterintuitive to all the big businesses that are out there that, make a huge profit on the fact that you don't know?
Exactly. And that's how they're making their money is when you go and buy that refrigerator and you go, oh, is this a smart fridge? It could tell you everything in your fridge. You're not thinking, oh, we can make money off of you. Like, if you get anything for free and you don't know why they're making money, that's because you are the product.
Of course.
And so that's a defensive way of thinking that's not ingrained into our brains yet. That most average people who are not technically savvy don't understand how we now have $5 or $8 trillion companies. Like, how do you think they made their money? Like, most of these companies don't even charge you anything.
There's a reason why your iPhone was free.
Yeah, it's your data. And so help explain to the brain, like, how is it that your data is being manipulated? And one of the things that why psychology is so important is people don't realize, I hate to say it, how easily manipulated we are as a group.
Mm-hmm.
And how easily it is to take those dopamine and emotional receptors and manipulating them. And that's really the only trick that they have up their sleeve, is for them to trigger emotional responses in you. So you make bad decisions, like buy that spend extra $500 for a fridge that has something that you might not need. And so that would be what I would train people on, is we've moved away from an economy of needs to economy of wants. Because 99% of all the stuff that we need, like, no one farms anymore. Like, you don't go to the supermarket and worry about food because we've automated all of that. All the things that we need we've solved those problems. Now, so where do we get money? Based off of wants, which is now convincing you to spend $50,000 more on a car that you don't really need, or to buy, nostalgia stuff and all of these stuff. It's all emotional.
And I think the key word in what you said earlier is it's very easy to manipulate us as a group, right? Because as a group, we all don't want to feel like we're missing out. Right. And it ties back into people jumping on the iPhone bandwagon or buying or getting a Tesla. I mean, I'm part of that. Right. It's like, I got a Tesla just because I think it's a great car. Obviously, I wanted an electric car, but I could have got a Volt or something that's much less expensive. It's the branding, it's the marketing, it's the need to be part of the group, the collective.
And it's not any failure of anyone, because you've got the smartest people in the world making oodles of money, manipulating those same receptors. There's just as many neuroscience and psychologists in a tech company as there are engineers.
Well, it's essentially what cult leaders do.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. I think if you understand the basic core needs of a human being, what we need, which is to feel valuable, to feel wanted, to feel important, to fit in, because if we don't fit in, you're going to be, quote unquote, killed because you'll be rejected, alone in the jungle. That's biological. That's never going to change. So if you can figure out a way to get people to buy something so you fit in with everybody else, I mean, you're essentially the cult leader of the world.
Yeah, we've seen now even governments, right?
Yeah.
Like, governments have mastered. There have been whole governments that have the dictators there because they've mastered Twitter marketing. It's amazing to watch. It's like, what was it? I have some engineers from Venezuela. It's hilarious because they were explaining to me how their dictator was, because he basically had an amazing marketing team that built out fake tweets, and that's the explanation of the fall of their government.
Yeah, I mean, that happens everywhere. That happens here too.
Absolutely. We just went through.
It's not. Yeah,
we've got some examples. We've got some examples,
and we
here.
still go through it.
Yeah.
I mean, he wasn't the first. He's not the last. I mean, that's everywhere in the world. It's all about control and power, and like these high trillion-dollar net worth individuals, they don't do it for the money anymore. They haven't done it for the money for a very, very long time. It's the power. It's the control.
So what can you do? I mean, they have the money and the power, but what we got to do is educate the masses, because unfortunately we have 4 or 5 generations now. Boomers, millennials, Xers, Z, like a whole group. Like I thought that Gen Z, as I got to know them, that they would understand a lot of the tricks of technology. They don't.
Really?
They don't understand how they're being. Like an example was, I was talking with one kid about Klarna, right? Like, she's like, "Oh, I bought this on Klarna." I'm like, "You do realize that's going to make you broke soon, right? Like, it's a credit card." "No, it's not a credit card. I'm going to pay it off within 4." I'm like, "Well, that's how all debt works."
Yeah.
And so those type of, I call them life skills, like you don't get those taught at school anymore. And so we got to sit back and And maybe that is an advantage for corporations, is for most people not to understand personal finance and how
Of course.
manipulation works and psychology works. So maybe that is a thing
There's
that
a
we
reason
can
why
do
it
for
was, it's
society.
very difficult for a certain class of individual to get into a university.
Yeah.
And that's why, universal education for free doesn't exist in most, not in at least first world countries. You have to pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
That takes us on a whole trajectory of,
Well,
conspiracy theories, but
in regards to, earlier you were talking about mimicking. So in the mental health space, I would say we can go into all the fancy trauma words, the fancy nervous system words, but at the end of the day, people want to be heard, they want to be seen, they want to be known, they want to know that they're important, and they want to be loved and accepted. Like half the work I've done with people is just helping people feel heard, helping them feel accepted. And half the time when people they come to me and they share their deep, darkest moments of their life, the things they're most ashamed about, the most traumatic moments of their life, and they thought, oh wow, I feel so safe with you. I'm like, why do you feel safe? Well, you're just not judgmental. I'm like, okay. So I'm also being empathetic towards you, and I'm sensitive to what you've gone through. So that's me as a human and my ability to do that. Is an AI going to be able to offer empathy to another human?
Absolutely.
How?
So this is the interesting thing. So let's define empathy.
Let's do
Empathy
it.
is, for my definition, understanding from another person's perspective without necessarily agreeing. And anyone who's been to a great therapist is that you're great listeners, and they're somehow able to absorb all your trauma without like taking it personally. Otherwise, they would go crazy, right? Like
Well, they
I would
do.
last. Yeah,
Not all therapists.
not all of it. But think about what computers are able to do. They can practice empathy in that they can listen and absorb lots of information without any emotional trauma.
like zero.
Zero, none. They don't have emotion. Now, emotion is triggered by the 4 chemicals in their brain, dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and all that. It doesn't have any of that. So here's an interesting thing about human language and why we connect. We learned a lot about language just in the last 5 years, 10 years. So as we experience life, have you noticed that when you talk to someone, they have a way of speaking that you almost can recognize based on how they phrase things, their personality, and who's saying it. And you can almost imagine your friends the way they speak. Well, what we found is when language is basically intelligence. It's how we communicate with each other. It's how we connect. But within language, most of language is useless. Like Bob ate dinner. That's all you need to know from that sentence. Those are called what they call non-functional words. So the very basics of that sentence in there. But what we do as humans is subconsciously put a lot of filler words in there. And that subconsciously is our experiences and our personality. And what they found is a new study called neurolinguistic grammar is that how we phrase sentences and how we put together words and our choices of words, the statistical probability of one word versus another word is what makes us unique. And from there, how you phrase a sentence, it could tell things like your state of mind, your psychology, what you're thinking. And so we're just now realizing it. So they've done studies where they could, through data science, determine which poets are most likely to commit suicide. It's because of how they use pronouns. So the ones that tend to use I tend to be very emotionally feeling, and so they commit suicide more. It's a long study. So what we discovered with ChatGPT is when you ask it to say something like Bob ate dinner, and you said, do it in the style of Donald Trump, all of a sudden it spits it out, and you read it, you're like, oh my God, this totally came from him, right? It was the best dinner ever, blah, blah, blah. What we're finding is that we can, through those statistical choices of words, mimic different emotions, psychological states. So you could say, describe Bob ate dinner as a narcissist. Describe Bob ate dinner as a 12-year-old. Describe Bob ate dinner as all of these. And when you read it, it sounds very real. Now, is a computer actually becoming any of those people? No, all it did was it picked at all these types of people, whatever the psychological profile, chooses certain words in certain ways and grammatically structures them that gives it that psychological profile. And so that's why you can technically take the most empathetic people, the greatest therapists in the world, analyze all of their words, and you might find stylistically how they're healing, how they're able to add grammatical healing into their structuring. So that's a kind of interesting things I think is going to come out.
Well, again, I think like as someone who's worked with so many people, it is interesting, right? Because there's part of me that goes, there's individuals that seek help to release stress by talking to another person, releasing their stress by processing, problem solving. They go to a therapist to problem solve, share what their problems are, and a typical CBT therapist will go, here's a solution. Let's look at how you're thinking about this, and let's reframe it so you could think about it this way that helps you accomplish your goal. That's basically what happens with those types of therapists, right? So a lot, I think especially with COVID, like a lot of people sought out telehealth, correct? But there are those people that, like, for example, with me, I prefer being around another human being and doing a session with another human being in person than I do like a Zoom, right? Is someone going to be able to benefit processing really heavy trauma, processing death, grief with a robot? If you haven't in 12-step models, people who have gone through addiction, half of the reason they trust their mentor or their sponsor is because they know you went through that and you got to the other side of it. A robot hasn't shot heroin, hasn't overcome alcoholism, hasn't gone through being a parent, hasn't gone through loss. Yeah. And isn't that how we trust people? Like, you've gone through that? I'll shut up now. You can answer.
Well, so I think in the future when robots have hit ascension level, maybe we could talk about that. Right now, for me, what I'm hearing would be like technology to me isn't about replacing people. It's about what I call a force multiplier. It's about taking a service that people need and making it efficient and scaling it out to the masses. And so in this case, a lot of therapy in general is really about building tribes of other people that have also experienced the trauma, having someone who is that high quality therapist, psychologist, that expert to kind of guide them through their journey. And so in examples I've seen in telemedicine and teletherapy, it's not about replacing your high skilled people. It's about training people to get to that point, which AI may be helpful in training someone up by mimicking scenarios and running a training course. And then, someone high skilled is still high skilled. That's why I don't sit there and go, oh, I'm going to be replaced next week by robots, because they got to replace my 20 years, 30 years of programming experience working with people. What it can do, I've seen, is take the workflow and make it so that, that one expert therapist can impact 10,000 people instead of 100 people. And so that's what I look for when solving problems is different people might have different problems. I give you an example with my own medicine experiences. A lot of people's problems can be easily solved by a college grad medical assistant. So that comes in through our chatbot. They solve it, and you just need a prescription or whatever. It's our ability to manage workflow so that we can escalate it. So all of a sudden, this is a serious issue. And that information then goes to our medical director. And then the medical director will look at it and bring his expertise and solve the problem. Whereas, once again, while I was explaining doing the boring work, the medical director with I think he has 25 years been in the practice, isn't interested in solving simple foot fungal problems. He wants the gnarly problems, right?
Right.
So we funnel all the hard problems to him, And then all the simpler problems just go down to the lower tiers. And then whatever is really easy, like reminding you of your monthly flu shot or yearly flu shot or your prescription is due or et cetera, that the bot can handle. And with that, we're able to scale a practice that's only 100 physicians to be able to manage a nationwide practice.
And so are you saying that when you said that a robot AI could mimic empathy, are you saying that they could mimic empathy by recognizing empathetic language? And
So that would be an interesting problem. I just thought of it right now. Like what I just described about, how humans structure the language. Now that we have this technology that understands the context and down to the neuro level of structuring words, you could possibly detect through language someone in trauma or someone having issues, right? And I can totally see this coming soon to a workplace near you where you have these bots that are listening to all the emails and chats in the company system and detecting when there's a serious HR violation about to happen or something like that. You're seeing this right now in schools where a lot of people don't know this, but during COVID, a lot of the school education systems, their email systems and everything, are being fed to AI to detect suicides and circumvent bullying.
Well, I like that.
Yeah.
How?
It was using some of the older technology, but it's detecting, slur words or
Based off of an email?
Yeah. So this is something for the parents to, this is an example of awareness, right? A lot of parents don't realize that these startups have already embedded their applications into, so when your kid is sending homework and everything through their system, there is a bot listening to everything. And because ChatGPT only came out this year, soon these companies will have the ability to understand neurological implications in there. And so it'll be able to detect, it just needs to detect a few kids who are, let's say, suicidal, find those signals, and now you could scale across the whole LAUSD. Now, here's where it becomes scary Orwellian, right? The issues that were happening was when it saw words like gay or homophobic slurs, it got some kids in trouble, but also outed some children who were not ready or were confused. And so what do you do in those situations? Just like every technology is not good or evil, it just does. In the original intent was to do something good, which is prevent suicides. But you can totally see where it creates this weird censorship where children now don't feel safe speaking their mind, knowing that everything that they're saying is being monitored. So what do we do with that? I have no solution for that.
That's crazy.
But it's coming because
Can there be a filter system? I mean,
because unfortunately, with all technology, the first group of kids are going to be the ones where we make the mistakes.
The test subjects.
Yeah. I think my children might be the first test subjects, and my grandchildren will have a beautiful, wonderfully working system. But the generation coming up are our first test subjects. They're going to be hitting our first bugs, so to speak. And that's the scary thing about technology. You have to break eggs.
How are you going to convince somebody that you shouldn't be doing this? Because at the same time, you're solving the suicidality rates, right? You're trying to create preventions for that. So.
And there is no solution because just like you were saying, is there ever going to be a case where there are no problems? And in a society where everything's perfect and there are no problems, we would be horribly miserable and all kill ourselves, right? Because there's always problems. We're always going to find problems. And every time we try and solve that problem, we're going to create some side effect that we never thought about.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting where it all leads, especially with the introduction of robotics as well. Because I think that there's a huge benefit for an individual to physically see a reaction to something, where it's not just based off of the written or said word, but the way your hand, like when I would go see my therapist, like he would see me look down or look left or right or move a certain direction or slouch or in response to something that was asked or something that I said, and based off of that visual perception, he was able to ask certain questions that could lead to a better answer. Whereas if you have someone that is has struggled with a traumatic experience in life and you're helping them treat the trauma, a lot of they can be sitting there in silence, and the technology might not be able to give a response to that.
Well, the technology that we know of today now,
Today,
Elon's
correct.
always, he's going to be an interesting character when we read about him in the history books for our children, because he seems to be in the forefront of everything. Where you were talking about Neuralink is, we are seeing so much about how the human brain works in real time. It's ridiculous. With fMRI technology, what it means is we're able to scan the brain and how it oxygenates and deoxygenates to figure out what the brain is happening. Now, I just read this like 2 weeks ago, where they've accomplished this where they can scan your brain and watch it and play you music and analyze how your brain reacts to music. And now it can predict, based off just the scans, what music you're listening to.
Mm.
Like Jay-Z?
Yeah, it can get it down to very high degree accuracy, because by the theory behind AI is because we're mimicking neurons and how the brain works. We can now map the brain as it's actively working. Now we can simulate it and process the data. So now if we could take music and figure out what kind of music you're listening to based off of what you're listening to, we can now start monitoring your brain pretty much real time. And so now we could take two people who, let's say, are going through trauma and watch their brains, and then the computer will figure out what is the statistical changes in their brain that gives it a signal, we call it in data science, that tells us this person is going through trauma. This person is lying. This person is feeling unhappy. This person is feeling happy. That day is coming. I literally just talked a month ago to a group of neuroscientists. They're now creating an fMRI scan. It's only $1,500, and you just put it on your head. It just looks like a headband, and it can scan your brain for rehabilitation during stroke. And it's already coming. Like soon you'll have a little headband that can manage, monitor your brain in real time of everything that's going on. Now, what Elon's working on is something that you can implant into the brain and give you that data directly, which is the best type of data you possibly have.
In the moment, as it's happening.
Yeah.
That's scary.
And so there's no reason why we can't have an implant. I mean,
I'm just curious how many people are going to opt in for this.
well, you might not have a choice because of humans being tribal. If you could have an implant and you could Google anything you want, like think about how slow words and typing is. It's about 100, 200 words per minute. You can now Google an answer to a problem on a test, and then all of a sudden it's in your head. Like, what parent would not make their kid do that?
I wouldn't.
I would never.
Nope.
Like thank God.
Nope.
Ever.
Yeah.
But would you?
Well, think about the pressure now, because society-wise, you would be unable to have a job because now you'd be the person who's like completely out of it.
And I would learn how to live with 10 people on a farm and get away from society.
There's this new show I was telling Rachel earlier. It's on Netflix about the blue zones and people who live to be centurions, 100 years old. And it's so interesting because like all of these places, they have little to zero technology, and they live off the land, and they eat healthy.
I agree with them, by the way. If I were a braver man, I'd do it.
I mean, it's a dream of mine and my wife's to move to Costa Rica, and it happens to be that actually one of the villages is in Costa Rica.
Wow.
And
You talk to most technologists, we all agree it's not like we're sitting there naively building technology. We're just as scared as everyone else, especially ones that have children. But it's like you just look at history. What has prevented us from throwing away our cell phone? Like that's a simple thing, right? Like the Neuralink example I gave you. Like, wouldn't it be as simple as all of us just throwing away our iPhones right now? I can't do it. I just can't.
Mm,
It's hard, and it's
very
why
hard.
being human is so hard in modern life.
Yeah. Well, we want to, and we have, there's an illusion of a choice to be able to.
Yeah.
Whereas if something is installed in your mind, you don't have any choices.
I'll let you do it first.
I'm not doing it.
I can't do it.
I'll be
just
dead by
can't.
then.
Yeah.
I'll be happily dead by then.
I just feel like the freest place we exist is in our mind and in your ability to think and have privacy with your thoughts.
But you think you have the ability to think. And that's the scary part, is that your mind is so programmed to either need or want or already make that decision that there's an illusion that you have the freedom of choice in these situations. You don't.
The quickest way to see how programmed you are is to just go to a foreign country like Japan or anything. You realize that, we
Yeah, but you can challenge your programming.
It's hard.
Japan is not the foreign country you should go to not use technology. They use technology like insane. I would say like go to Goa.
Yeah, but if
Oh,
you elevate,
and
I agree.
literally have no technology.
if you elevate your consciousness, I'm obsessed with challenging my programming on a daily basis. That's my
but
obsession.
yet you also checked your iWatch at least 5 times during this interview.
Yeah.
So
No, it's because the timer was going. No,
I
that's
did too.
you, bro.
I did too.
That was you.
I did too.
I don't look at my.
No, I
don't
agree
have
with you.
Shush your mouth. I don't check my Apple Watch for messages. I check for the timer.
yeah.
Oh, whatever. I'm not addicted to my Apple Watch like you are. Having said that, why don't you close this out, Arthur?
No. I haven't closed it out in a minute. Go ahead.
Well, Charles, thank you so much. I feel like you're going to be
I definitely want your cell phones. I'm going to call you once the world starts taking over.
Well, I'm glad I have 10 acres of land in New Mexico. That's all I can
I'm
say.
moving there.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are going to be moving with me.
I'll get a hut.
Yeah. Thank you everyone for listening to this episode of Got Mental Health. I appreciate the time you took to listening to this. I hope that you could take away just the need to educate your kids, the need to educate yourselves, like learn, be curious. I feel like the more that we can, I don't know, like really connect with each other and focus on our need for connection with another human being, like the better off we're going to be mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, and then figure out a way to also incorporate AI to help assist, in my opinion. So thank you for all your comments on Instagram and TikTok. Thank you for listening today, and do one kind thing for yourself and another person today. Thanks so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Arthur, it's nice to have you back.
It's good to be back.